The silence of deep space had never bothered humanity much. While other species filled the void with constant chatter across quantum networks, humans preferred the quiet. They went about their business with methodical patience, exploring systems that others deemed too remote or unprofitable to bother with. Reed adjusted his position in the command chair, watching the sensor displays paint a picture of yet another unremarkable star system. His ship, the Horizon Walker, drifted through space at a leisurely pace that would make most alien crews nervous. Humans had a reputation for being thorough rather than fast, and Reed saw no reason to change that impression. The Galactic Council had accepted humanity 50 years ago with the kind of polite enthusiasm reserved for harmless neighbors. Humans brought nothing threatening to the table. No superior weapons, no advanced technology that others couldn't match, no territorial ambitions. They asked for a small corner of space around their yellow star and promised to play nice with everyone else. Most council members had forgotten humans existed until trade reports reminded them. Human cargo ships moved goods efficiently but never competed aggressively for routes. Human diplomats attended meetings, voted sensibly on minor issues, and rarely spoke unless directly asked. Human colonies grew slowly and never expanded beyond their designated boundaries. Reed's communications officer, a young man named Alex, looked up from his station with mild interest. "Sir, we're picking up some unusual energy signatures from the edge of the system. Looks like ships, but not any configuration in our databases." "How many?" Reed asked, already knowing this routine would end with first contact protocols and lengthy diplomatic exchanges. Difficult to say. Maybe 30 or 40 vessels arranged in attack formation. Reed felt something cold settle in his stomach. Attack formation wasn't a term that appeared often in human reports these days. Attack formation? Are you certain? Alex nodded, his face growing pale as more data streamed across his displays. "Sir, they're moving toward us at high speed. These aren't exploration ships or traders." The main screen flickered to life, showing a massive vessel that looked like it had been designed by someone who enjoyed causing pain. Spikes and angular projections covered its hull, and weapon ports glowed with barely contained energy. Behind it, dozens of similar ships spread out in a pattern that spoke of military precision. A harsh voice filled the bridge, speaking in heavily accented galactic standard. "Unknown vessel, you will surrender immediately. This system now belongs to the hegemony. Your ship and crew are forfeit." Reed exchanged glances with his crew. In 50 years of peaceful contact, no human ship had ever received a surrender demand. The words felt strange and ancient, like something from the old stories that grandparents whispered when they thought children weren't listening. "This is Reed of the human vessel Horizon Walker. We're conducting peaceful exploration under Galactic Council authority. Perhaps we can discuss—" "Silence!" The alien voice cut through his words like a blade. "I am War Prime Corax of the Hegemony. Fleet, we do not discuss with inferior beings. You will power down your engines and prepare to be boarded." Through the view screen, Reed could see the alien ships moving into a perfect encirclement. Their movements showed the kind of coordination that only came from extensive battle experience. These weren't pirates or raiders looking for easy targets. These were professional soldiers who had done this many times before. "Sir?" Alex whispered. "I'm reading weapons charging across their entire fleet. These aren't warning shots they're preparing." Reed nodded slowly. He opened a channel to his small crew, knowing that whatever happened next would change everything. "All hands, this is the captain. We're about to be attacked by unknown hostiles. Send an emergency beacon to Earth immediately. Full records, everything we've observed." The transmission burst away from their ship at faster-than-light speed, carrying with it the coordinates of the alien fleet and recordings of their demands. Somewhere in human space, computers would receive the data and begin processes that had been dormant for decades. War Prime Corax appeared on screen, a creature that looked like evolution had designed it specifically for warfare. Multiple arms, ended in claws. Thick armor plating covered its torso, and eyes like burning coals studied Reed with obvious contempt. You humans are even more pathetic than our intelligence suggested. Weak, slow, defenseless. Your entire species will make excellent slaves once we finish claiming your worlds. Reed felt something stirring in his chest, an emotion that felt both foreign and familiar. We haven't done anything to threaten you. There's no reason for violence. Corax's laugh sounded like metal scraping against stone. Reason? The only reason we need is that you exist in space we want. But since you amuse me with your cowardice, I will provide a demonstration. The view screen shifted to show another human vessel, a civilian transport carrying families to a new colony. Reed recognized the design immediately. It was unarmed, unarmored, and completely helpless against military-grade weapons. No, Reed said, his voice carrying an edge that made his crew look up in surprise. Don't. The Hegemony flagship fired a single beam that turned the transport ship into expanding plasma. 17 families, including children, vanished in an instant of superheated gas and scattered atoms. Reed stared at the empty space where the ship had been, feeling something fundamental shift inside him. Around the bridge, his crew sat in stunned silence, their faces reflecting the same mixture of grief and growing anger. Consider that your lesson in the futility of resistance, Corax said. Now surrender, or I will demonstrate further. But Reed wasn't looking at the alien anymore. He was thinking about the emergency beacon racing toward Earth, carrying news that someone had killed human civilians without provocation. He was remembering stories his grandfather used to tell about the old days when humans solved problems differently. We surrender, Reed said quietly. Corax smiled with too many teeth. Excellent. You will be valuable examples when we address your Galactic Council. What War Prime Corax didn't understand was that Reed wasn't surrendering to save his ship. He was buying time for a message to reach people who remembered how humans used to handle threats. People who had spent 50 years pretending to be something they weren't. People who were about to remember exactly what they were capable of when someone threatened their families. Director Hayes walked through the corridors of Council Station with the measured pace of someone carrying terrible news. Other species hurried past her. Tall, graceful beings who moved like dancers, crystalline entities that chimed softly as they walked, energy creatures that flickered between visible and invisible. All of them radiated the calm confidence of civilizations that had known peace for thousands of years. None of them understood what they were about to witness. The emergency session had been called within hours of receiving Reed's transmission. Standard procedure dictated a careful review of the incident, diplomatic protests through proper channels, and eventually some form of compensation for the destroyed vessel. The Council had handled hundreds of similar situations over the millennia. Hayes entered the Great Chamber, where representatives from 847 species gathered to maintain galactic peace. The chamber itself was a marvel of engineering, a vast sphere where each delegate could exist in their preferred environment while still participating in discussions. Gravity fields, atmosphere barriers, and energy shields created thousands of micro-environments within the single space. At the center of the sphere, a holographic display showed the location of the incident. Red markers indicated the destroyed human transport and Reed's captured vessel. The assembled delegates studied the tactical display with the detached interest of academics reviewing an historical event. Counselor Theron, eldest of the crystalline Eternals, spoke first. His voice resonated like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. The matter before us appears straightforward. An aggressive species has destroyed a civilian vessel and captured exploration personnel. We shall dispatch our usual diplomatic protest and demand reparations. Several other delegates nodded agreement. This was how things worked in civilized space. Violence was met with paperwork, aggression with strongly worded messages, and eventually everyone returned to peaceful commerce. Hayes stepped forward to the human delegation platform. The chamber's systems automatically adjusted lighting and atmosphere for her comfort, just as they did for every other species. What they couldn't adjust for was the expression on her face, something that would have alarmed any human who saw it. "Honorable delegates," Hayes began, her voice carrying clearly through the chamber's translation systems. "Humanity thanks the Council for this emergency session." War Prime Corax materialized as a hologram in the center of the chamber, his image projected from his flagship beyond the galactic rim. He looked around at the assembled aliens with obvious amusement. "Ah, the great Galactic Council," Corax said, his laugh echoing strangely through the chamber. "Still playing at civilization, I see. Very well. I will make this simple for your limited minds. The hegemony claims all space beyond the rim. Any ships found in our territory will be destroyed or captured. Any species that objects will be conquered. The A." Delegates stirred uneasily. Such direct threats were almost unheard of in modern galactic politics. Hayes listened to Corax's demands with the patience of someone who had already made her decision. When he finished, she stepped closer to the center of the chamber. "War Prime Corax," she said, her voice carrying a strange formality that made several alien delegates look up in surprise. "Humanity makes the following demand. Return the bodies of our civilians for proper burial. Release our captured personnel immediately. Withdraw all hegemony forces from human space within 72 standard hours." The chamber fell silent. In 3,000 years of Council history, no species had ever responded to aggression with such direct demands. Diplomacy was about negotiation, compromise, and face-saving measures for all parties. Corax's laughter filled the chamber. "The soft flesh things make demands? How delightful! We have consumed 17 civilizations, little human. Your people will make amusing pets once we finish breaking your spirits." Hayes nodded slowly, as if she had expected exactly that response. She activated her personal communicator, and her next words carried across human space on emergency frequencies that hadn't been used in 50 years. "This is Director Hayes, authorization Omega 77. All Terran fleet assets, condition red. Rules of engagement are weapons-free. Repeat, weapons-free." The alien delegates looked confused by the unfamiliar human military terminology. They had no context for understanding what those words meant. Across human space, massive installations that had operated as mining facilities and research stations for decades began deep power cycles. Fusion reactors that had run at minimal output suddenly surged to full capacity. Defensive satellites that appeared to be communications arrays extended weapon systems that had remained hidden for half a century. In shipyards, that aliens believed produced only cargo vessels, workers began stripping away false hull sections to reveal the true ships beneath. What had appeared to be bulk freighters shed their outer shells like emerging butterflies, exposing sleek Predator-class warships armed with weapons that no galactic database contained specifications for. Admiral Stone stood in the command center of what aliens knew as Mining Station 12. The facility had processed raw materials for 50 years while secretly housing the largest military command structure humanity had ever built. Banks of screens came alive around him, showing fleet positions across human space. Stone was old enough to remember the last time humanity had gone to war. He had hoped never to see those days again, but someone had made the mistake of killing human families. "Admiral," his communications officer reported, "we're receiving responses from all fleet elements. Stealth protocols are being dropped across the board. Estimated time to full combat readiness is 6 hours." Stone studied the tactical displays showing hegemony fleet positions. 37 heavily armed vessels arranged in attack formations, backed by what appeared to be a mobile fortress. By galactic standards, it was an overwhelming force. By human standards from the old days, it was barely worth calling a proper fight. "Signal all commands," Stone said. Operation specifications are total destruction of military assets, preservation of civilian populations where possible. Any hegemony force that fails to surrender immediately is to be eliminated. Back on Council Station, War Prime Corax was still laughing at humanity's presumption when his tactical officer's urgent report cut through his amusement. War Prime, we're detecting massive energy signatures throughout human space. Multiple contacts, all showing military-grade power signatures. Corax's laughter died. Impossible. Human ships are cargo vessels and exploration craft. They have no military fleet. Sir, whatever they have, it's powering up right now. Hayes watched the confusion, spread across Corax's face with grim satisfaction. For 50 years, humanity had been the perfect galactic citizens, peaceful, cooperative, and completely harmless. They had maintained that illusion by hiding the most important truth about their species. They weren't a peaceful species that had learned to fight. They were a warrior species that had learned to be peaceful, and someone had just reminded them why they used to be very good at war. War Prime Corax discovered the first sign of trouble when his border monitoring station simply vanished from all communications. Not destroyed in obvious battles with explosions and debris fields, but completely gone as if they had never existed. His technical officers assured him it must be equipment failures or solar interference. The second sign came when long-range scouts reported sensor ghosts, readings that suggested massive objects moving at impossible speeds through supposedly empty space. The ghosts appeared and disappeared too quickly for positive identification, but their energy signatures were unlike anything in hegemony databases. The third sign was when an entire patrol fleet of 12 ships stopped responding to communications. While investigating the outer edge of human space, Corax stood in the command center of his flagship, studying tactical displays that made less sense with each passing hour. His species had conquered 17 different civilizations through superior firepower and aggressive tactics. They understood warfare in all its forms. What they were seeing now didn't match any form of warfare they recognized. War Prime, his sensor operator reported with barely concealed nervousness. We're detecting multiple contacts approaching from galactic spinward. Configuration unknown, but they're moving fast. Corax activated the main display, expecting to see the small, lightly armed human vessels he had observed during intelligence gathering. Instead, the screen showed ships that defied every assumption the hegemony had made about human technology. These weren't converted cargo vessels or modified exploration craft. These were purpose-built warships that moved through space with the fluid grace of apex predators. Their hulls reflected energy in ways that suggested armor technology beyond anything the hegemony possessed. Weapon ports that looked like they could crack planets dotted their surfaces. How many? Corax demanded. Difficult to determine, sir. They appear to be using some form of stealth technology. Our best estimate is 300 vessels, but the actual number could be higher. 300 ships. Corax's fleet numbered nearly 4,000, supported by mobile fortresses and planetary defense networks. The numbers still favored the hegemony significantly. What bothered him was how these ships moved. They flowed through space in coordinated groups, adjusting their formations with the kind of precision that only came from extensive battle experience. No species developed that level of tactical sophistication without fighting countless wars. Admiral Stone commanded the human fleet. From the bridge of the battleship Retribution, the ship had spent 47 years disguised as a bulk cargo hauler, moving peacefully through alien space, while its true nature remained hidden beneath false hull sections and sensor dampeners. Now, with its disguise dropped, the Retribution revealed itself as 2 kilometers of concentrated destructive potential. Its quantum torpedo tubes could reduce asteroids to component atoms. Its particle beam arrays could slice through planetary defense shields. Its armor could withstand direct hits from weapons that turned moons to molten slag. More importantly, it was crewed by humans who remembered how to use such weapons effectively. Admiral, his tactical officer reported, Hegemony Fleet is maintaining defensive positions around their mobile fortress. They're not advancing to meet us. Stone studied the enemy formation with the eye of someone who had spent decades analyzing alien military doctrine. The hegemony deployed their ships like a traditional siege force, heavy vessels arranged to protect their command ship, while smaller craft provided screening and reconnaissance. It was a perfectly reasonable strategy against any conventional opponent. Against humans, it was a fatal mistake. "Signal the fleet," Stone ordered. "Execute Wolfpack 7. All units weapons free." The human ships suddenly scattered in what appeared to be random directions, breaking their formation so completely that hegemony observers assumed they were retreating in panic. Several hegemony commanders prepared pursuit orders, expecting easy victories against fleeing enemies. Instead, the human fleet had just implemented a tactical doctrine that no other species had ever developed: coordinated pack hunting in three-dimensional space. The first hegemony ship to die never saw its killer. A human destroyer approached from directly below the galactic plane, using the gravity shadow of a nearby gas giant to mask its approach. It fired a single quantum torpedo that bypassed shields completely and detonated inside the target's reactor core. The explosion sent shockwaves through the hegemony formation, but before they could respond, 6 more ships exploded simultaneously as human vessels struck from impossible angles. "War Prime!" his tactical officer shouted over alarms and emergency reports. "We're under attack from multiple vectors. The human ships they're everywhere." Corax watched his carefully organized formation dissolve into chaos as human vessels appeared and disappeared like ghosts, striking with surgical precision before vanishing back into empty space. His ship's weapons couldn't lock onto targets that refused to fight conventionally. Every other species the hegemony had conquered followed predictable patterns. They formed battle lines, exchanged fire at long range, and eventually either surrendered or died in organized formations. Humans fought like nothing Corax had ever encountered. They used gravity wells to slingshot around obstacles at impossible speeds. They coordinated attacks across light years of space with timing precise to the microsecond. When their ships took damage, they didn't retreat to safe positions. They rammed themselves into enemy vessels while their reactors overloaded. Most disturbing of all, they seemed to actually enjoy the combat. Intercepted human communications revealed crews laughing as they executed maneuvers that would terrify any sane being, taking risks that bordered on suicidal to achieve tactical advantages. Within 2 hours, the hegemony had lost over 800 ships without destroying a single human vessel. Their mobile fortress found itself surrounded by enemies that appeared from nowhere and disappeared before defensive weapons could respond. "War Prime," his communications officer said with a voice that shook with fear. "We're receiving a transmission from the human fleet commander." Admiral Stone appeared on the main screen. His image transmitted from a ship that sensors couldn't locate precisely. He looked like an ordinary human. No natural weapons, no visible armor, no obvious physical advantages, but his eyes held something that made Corax's combat-hardened crew step back from their stations. "War Prime Corax," Stone said in a voice that carried no anger, no hatred, just cold professional assessment. "You killed human civilians. You threatened human space. You declared war on humanity." Stone paused, studying Corax with the detached interest of a scientist examining an interesting specimen. "We haven't fought a proper war in 50 years, Stone continued. "My crews are eager to remember what they're good at. Surrender now, and we'll accept your unconditional withdrawal from all human territory. Continue fighting, and we'll demonstrate why the galaxy learned to fear our species long ago." Corax realized with growing horror that he had made a fundamental error in judgment. He had assumed humans were peaceful because they chose to avoid conflict. The truth was becoming terrifyingly clear. Humans weren't peaceful. They were just very, very good at controlling themselves, and someone had just given them permission to stop. Dr. Rivers had been the human representative to the Galactic Council's Scientific Advisory Board for 12 years, during which time she had carefully maintained humanity's reputation as competent but unremarkable researchers. She attended meetings, contributed modest insights to various projects, and never drew attention to herself or her species. Now, as emergency reports flooded Council Station from across the galaxy, she found herself surrounded by alien scientists, demanding explanations she couldn't give without revealing secrets that humanity had guarded for 50 years. The main scientific conference room buzzed with nervous energy as representatives from dozens of species tried to understand what they were witnessing. Holographic displays showed tactical analyses of the human fleet's performance against the hegemony, and none of the data made sense according to established galactic understanding. Professor Kelth, a tall insectoid being from the academic world of New Athens, gestured at the tactical readouts with obvious frustration. The energy signatures we're detecting are impossible. Human ships are producing power levels that exceed their theoretical maximum reactor output by factors of 10 or more. Dr. Quinn, whose crystalline form chimed softly as she moved, added her own observations. Their tactical coordination suggests communication methods we cannot detect. Ships separated by light years are executing synchronized maneuvers with precision that defies known physics. Rivers listened to the increasingly agitated discussions while carefully maintaining an expression of puzzled concern. Around her, beings with millions of years of collective scientific experience struggled to understand how their quiet human neighbors had suddenly revealed capabilities that surpassed their own. What none of them understood was that every human ship they had observed over the past 50 years had been deliberately designed to appear inferior. Real human technology remained hidden behind carefully constructed facades that showed exactly what humanity wanted other species to see. The conference room's main display activated, showing a direct feed from the Council's emergency session. Councillor Theron stood at the center of the great chamber, his crystalline form resonating with barely controlled alarm. "Honored delegates," Theron announced, "we have received preliminary reports from our monitoring stations throughout the affected regions. The human military response has exceeded all predictive models. Hegemony forces are being systematically eliminated with efficiency that suggests extensive prior experience." The chamber stirred uneasily. In 3,000 years of galactic peace, no species had demonstrated such overwhelming military capability. Most civilizations had evolved beyond the need for advanced warfare, developing defensive capabilities while allowing offensive systems to atrophy through disuse. Director Hayes stood at the human delegation platform, her expression grave but unsurprised by the reports. She had spent her entire diplomatic career preparing for this moment, when humanity's true nature would inevitably be revealed. "Director Hayes," Theron's voice carried clearly through the chamber's translation systems. "The Council requests clarification regarding human military capabilities. Our records indicate that your species achieved faster-than-light travel through peaceful scientific advancement and has maintained minimal defensive forces since joining the galactic community." Hayes activated her platform's privacy shield, creating a moment of silence that stretched uncomfortably long. When she spoke, her words carried the weight of carefully hidden history. "Councillor Theron, the records submitted by humanity upon joining the Council were incomplete. The admission sent shockwaves through the assembled delegates. Incomplete records meant deliberate deception, a concept so foreign to galactic politics that many species lacked words for it. Back in the scientific conference room, Dr. Rivers watched her colleagues' confusion grow as more reports arrived. Human fleet movements showed tactical sophistication that could only come from extensive combat experience, but humanity's official history claimed they had achieved interstellar travel during a golden age of scientific cooperation. "Professor," Kelth's compound eyes focused on Rivers with sudden intensity. "Dr. Rivers, you have access to human historical databases. Can you explain these discrepancies? Rivers realized that 50 years of careful deception were about to end. She activated her personal communicator and spoke a single phrase. Authorization. Clearance 7 Alpha. Historical disclosure protocols activated. Across human space, computer systems that had maintained fabricated records for half a century began revealing the truth. Real historical data, military specifications, and technological capabilities that had been carefully hidden from galactic databases suddenly became available to anyone with proper security clearance. The first truth was that humans hadn't achieved faster-than-light travel through peaceful research. They had developed it during the final phases of a planetary war that had consumed 3 billion lives and turned entire continents into radioactive wastelands. FTL technology emerged from military necessity, created by desperate scientists trying to escape a dying world. The second truth was that humanity's peaceful expansion into their local stellar region had been anything but peaceful. For 3 centuries after achieving interstellar travel, humans had fought themselves across dozens of star systems in conflicts that made their terrestrial wars look like minor disputes. The third truth was that every human ship, every human colony, and every human technological advancement had been forged in the crucible of constant warfare. They hadn't learned to be peaceful despite their nature. They had learned to be peaceful because they had become too good at violence. Rivers watched the horror spread across her colleagues' faces as the real human databases uploaded to the galactic networks. Technical specifications for weapons that could crack planets. Battle records spanning thousands of engagements. Tactical manuals that treated the destruction of entire fleets as routine operational procedures. 3,000 years, Dr. Quinn whispered, her crystalline form resonating with shock. Your species spent 3,000 years in continuous warfare. Rivers nodded grimly. We called it the Long Night. Every human alive today carries the genetic legacy of survivors from the most competitive environment any species has ever created. We didn't join galactic civilization because we outgrew violence. We joined because we finally learned to control it. In the council chamber, War Prime Corax's holographic image flickered as his communication systems struggled with battle damage. His flagship was now the sole surviving vessel from a fleet of 4,000, hidden behind the rapidly failing shields of his mobile fortress. Impossible! Corax snarled, his image distorting as another human attack rattled his ship. No species develops such capabilities. Evolution doesn't produce such monsters. Director Hayes smiled with an expression that would have terrified any human who recognized it. War Prime, you made a fundamental error. You assumed we were herbivores who learned to fight. She paused, letting the weight of revelation settle over the assembled delegates. We're not herbivores who learned to fight. We're apex predators who learned to be herbivores. The difference is that when someone threatens our families, we remember what we used to be. The council chamber fell silent as the implications became clear. For 50 years, the galaxy's most dangerous species had been living next door, pretending to be harmless while maintaining the capacity to destroy civilizations. They had chosen peace not from weakness, but from strength so overwhelming that they could afford to be gentle until someone gave them a reason not to be. The final battle began at dawn over Hegemony Prime, though dawn meant little in the artificial light of a space battle. War Prime Corax commanded his last fleet from the bridge of a fortress that had never known defeat, surrounded by the remnants of military might that had conquered 17 civilizations. Against him came Admiral Stone's fleet of 300 human warships, moving through space with the deadly precision of a predator pack closing in for the kill. Across the galaxy, monitoring stations tracked every moment of the engagement. This wasn't just a battle between two fleets. It was a demonstration that would reshape galactic civilization forever. Corax studied his tactical displays with the growing desperation of someone who finally understood his mistake. His fortress, mounted weapons that could sterilize planets, defended by shields that had withstood the combined firepower of entire species. Around him, the surviving ships of his armada formed protective screens that had proven impenetrable for centuries. It should have been enough to destroy any attacking force, no matter how advanced. But humans didn't fight the way other species fought. The attack began with something no alien military doctrine had ever considered: coordinated strikes from 17 different directions simultaneously, each timed to arrive at exactly the same microsecond. Human ships emerged from hyperspace at impossible angles, some diving up from below the galactic plane, others descending from positions that required them to have traveled through regions of space that sensors showed as empty. Corax's fortress. Shields flared to maximum power as weapons designed to crack moons struck from every possible vector. For a moment, the ancient barriers held against the impossible assault. Then the humans did something that redefined the word impossible. Instead of continuing their attack against the shields, the human ships began moving in a complex three-dimensional pattern around the fortress. Their engines left trails of exotic particles that formed geometric shapes in space, shapes that began to resonate with the fortress's shield frequencies. War Prime, his technical officer reported with barely controlled panic. They're creating some form of interference pattern. Our shields are becoming unstable. Corax watched in horrified fascination as the human fleet turned physics itself into a weapon. They weren't just fighting his ships. They were fighting the laws of reality and winning. The fortress shields collapsed not from overwhelming force, but because the humans had convinced them they shouldn't exist. Stone's voice echoed across all frequencies as his ships closed in for the final assault. War Prime Corax, this is your last chance to surrender. Power down your weapons and prepare to be boarded. Corax activated his personal communications system, broadcasting on emergency frequencies that would reach every corner of hegemony space. All remaining forces, this is War Prime Corax. Do not attempt to rescue the fortress. Do not engage human vessels. Repeat, avoid contact with human ships at all costs. His tactical officer looked up in surprise. War Prime, you're ordering a general retreat? Corax nodded, his warrior's pride finally overcome by the mathematical certainty of annihilation. I'm ordering our species to survive. These humans aren't just better warriors than we are. They're better warriors than anyone has ever been. The human fleet moved through the remaining hegemony ships like a scythe through grain, disabling weapons, systems, and propulsion with surgical precision while leaving life support intact. They destroyed military capability without destroying the beings who had threatened them. In 18 minutes of combat, the hegemony ceased to exist as a military force. But the humans weren't finished. As reports reached Earth about the battle's conclusion, something unexpected happened. Human medical ships appeared throughout former hegemony territory, offering aid to wounded enemies. Human engineering crews began repairing civilian infrastructure damaged during the conflict. Admiral Stone established temporary headquarters on the fortress he had just captured, not as a conqueror, but as someone cleaning up a necessary mess. His first official communication went out to every survivor of the hegemony military. To all former hegemony personnel, your war machine is dismantled. Your offensive capability is permanently removed. Your people are free to choose their own future. Any individual or group that chooses violence against any sentient being will be eliminated quickly and quietly. Those who choose peace will find humanity ready to help rebuild what your leaders destroyed. The message was simple, direct, and absolutely final. Back on Council Station, the emergency session had transformed from crisis management to fundamental reassessment of galactic politics. Species that had dismissed humanity as harmless neighbors now found themselves reconsidering every interaction they had ever had with humans. Director Hayes stood before the assembled delegates with the same calm professionalism she had always displayed, But now everyone understood what lay beneath that peaceful exterior. The Council will naturally want to discuss humanity's incomplete historical records, Hayes said. We accept full responsibility for our deception, though I would point out that honesty about our capabilities would have prevented none of this conflict. Counselor Theron's crystalline form resonated with complex harmonics as he processed the implications. Director Hayes, the Council must ask, if humanity possesses such overwhelming military superiority, why did you choose to join us as equals rather than conquerors? Hayes smiled with genuine warmth, an expression that somehow made her seem more dangerous rather than less. Because, Counselor Theron, we learned something during our 3,000 years of warfare that apparently escaped the hegemony's attention. Victory isn't about destroying your enemies. It's about not needing enemies in the first place. She gestured toward the tactical displays still showing the aftermath of the battle. We could have conquered the galaxy 50 years ago, but what would have been the point? We already had everything we wanted: friends, trade partners, and peaceful neighbors. Why would we destroy that to rule over subjects who feared us? The chamber fell silent as delegates absorbed this perspective. In their experience, superior military capability inevitably led to territorial expansion and political dominance. The concept of choosing restraint from a position of overwhelming strength was almost incomprehensible. Days later, as news of humanity's true nature spread throughout galactic civilization, the effects rippled across thousands of worlds. Trade routes shifted as species reconsidered their relationship with human space. Diplomatic equations changed, as governments realized their quiet neighbors were actually the galaxy's apex predators. But the most significant change was in how conflicts were resolved. The mere possibility that humans might become involved gave every potential aggressor pause. The galaxy had learned a new equation. There were species you might fight, species you might defeat, and species you might conquer. And then there were the humans, who had spent 50 years proving they preferred peace while maintaining the capacity to end any war in 18 minutes. Reed, finally released from hegemony captivity, found himself back aboard the Horizon Walker as it resumed its peaceful exploration mission. His crew went about their duties with the same methodical efficiency they had always shown, but now everyone in the galaxy knew what lay beneath that calm professionalism. As his ship drifted through the silence of deep space, Reed reflected on how much had changed in such a short time. Humanity had revealed its true nature to the galaxy, and surprisingly, the revelation had made them not more feared, but more respected. The galaxy now understood that humans hadn't chosen peace from weakness. They had chosen it from strength so absolute that they could afford to be gentle with everyone else. It was a lesson that would echo through galactic history for millennia to come. 3 months after the hegemony's defeat, the first diplomatic changes became apparent. Species that had never shown interest in human space suddenly requested trade agreements and cultural exchanges. Others, particularly those with aggressive tendencies, began making significant efforts to resolve their conflicts through peaceful means rather than risk drawing human attention. The Galactic Council formally censured humanity for the deception regarding their military capabilities, then immediately voted to expand human representation in recognition of their role as galactic peacekeepers. It was a contradiction that perfectly captured the complex new reality. Admiral Stone returned to what aliens still believed was Mining Station 12, where his ships resumed their disguises as civilian infrastructure. The weapons powered down, the false hull sections were reattached, and humanity went back to appearing harmless and unremarkable. But now everyone knew it was a choice, not a limitation. The hegemony's former territories became a patchwork of independent worlds, each choosing their own path forward with human support but not human control. Some requested help rebuilding their shattered civilizations. Others asked for protection against potential threats. All of them understood that their former victims had become their protectors not through conquest, but through demonstration. of overwhelming restraint. Director Hayes submitted her resignation to the Council, citing the need for new leadership now that humanity's true nature was revealed. Her replacement, a younger diplomat named Ambassador Park, arrived with instructions to be completely honest about human capabilities while maintaining the same commitment to peaceful cooperation. The galaxy adapted to its new understanding with surprising speed. Trade flourished as species realized that humans made reliable partners precisely because they were strong enough to afford generosity. Scientific cooperation expanded as other civilizations began to understand that human modest technology was actually deliberately limited for everyone else's comfort. Most importantly, conflicts that might have escalated to violence were increasingly resolved through negotiation, mediation, and compromise, not because the species involved had become more enlightened, but because everyone understood what happened, to those who chose aggression over diplomacy. The lesson was simple and absolute. There were many ways to settle disputes in a civilized galaxy, but only one way to earn the personal attention of a species that had perfected violence as an art. Form before learning to control it. In the depths of space, human ships continued their quiet exploration of distant systems, their crews maintaining the same methodical patience that had characterized humanity's presence in galactic civilization for 50 years. They remained friendly neighbors, helpful trading partners, and reliable allies. They just happened to be the most dangerous neighbors, partners, and allies the galaxy had ever known. And now, finally, everyone understood why you don't threaten humans.